Okay, so let's talk about the 12 Caesars. A very good book by Suetonius. In 3 points, the book tells us that when people get a lot of power, some of them go mad by it and give in to every wrong thing, every vice, every depravity. And in ancient society, dreams, auspices, and superstitions, they all played a big role in decisions made by these emperors and by other people who influenced these emperors. Human nature embodies a duality, and this duality is like the conscious and the unconscious, and reason and insanity in that order. Suetonius's 12 Caesars gives a brief look at each life of emperors from Augustus all the way up to Domitian. It also includes Julius Caesar, who wasn't an emperor, but he was a dictator and the ender of the Roman Republic. So why is this? What's useful about this book? Well, it's a great look at people in power in ancient times, and these people, these emperors, had a lot of it. They were at the top of the world, essentially. Very big figures. So looking at this book and studying this book is amazing if you like cultural and social history, or just want to understand leaders as a whole. Leaders throughout time were also inspired by these emperors, and leaders today, of course, will still be influenced by them in some way. They might like something they did and they might try and emulate it. Human nature hasn't really changed in 2 millennia. We are still the same. My favorite 3 quotes are: too many rulers are a dangerous thing. Liberty to speak and think as one pleases is the test of a free country. All emperors are necessarily wretched, since only their assassination can convince the public that the conspiracies against their lives are real. So the 12 Caesars covers the period from the end of the Roman Republic and the lives of the Julio-Claudian emperors, and of those during the year of the 4 emperors, which was AD 69. And because of this turmoil, we have another dynasty that follows, the Flavian Dynasty, from Vespasian to Domitian, and then in the end. So we'll take a journey, and the journey will go as follows. We'll have Julius Caesar, then we'll have Augustus and the Julio-Claudian Dynasty from Augustus all the way to Nero, and we have the year of the 4 emperors. And then after the succession settles, we land on Vespasian and go from him to his sons Titus and Domitian in the Flavian Dynasty. And then after that, the book concludes before reaching the next emperors, which are known as the good emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, who wrote the Meditations. Let's talk briefly about the end of the Roman Republic and Julius Caesar's ascension to power. What did he do? Well, you might know the story about him being held by pirates, which he threatened to kill while he was in captivity, and he did so after they released him and the ransom was paid. Caesar wanted absolute power from the youth. There was a story about an apparition sat near the waters near the river Rubicon. It ran across the bridge blowing a trumpet, so Caesar's men went, "Alright, let's go. Let's cross the Rubicon," and Caesar went with them. Caesar said, "Let this be a sign from the gods, and follow where they beckon. In vengeance on our double-dealing enemies, the die is cast." Caesar respected physicians and educators, and he was quite progressive in his ways. He allowed Gauls to become senators. Though he was a joint consul with a man called Marcus Bibulus, he largely overwrote him, so much so that, as a joke, officials would sign documents in the names of Julius and of Caesar. So yes, there was still 2 consuls, but Julius Caesar was essentially a dictator, with Marcus Bibulus being overwritten by him. But as we know with Julius Caesar, his reign didn't end well. There was a story that the tomb of Capys was disturbed. They found a tablet, a bronze tablet, that said, "When the bones of Capys are disturbed, a descendant of his will be murdered by his kindred and later avenged at great cost to Italy." And now this refers to Julius Caesar's assassination. And he was assassinated on the Ides of March at the Senate Hall. Some say he wasn't willing to live anymore. He said better good death is to be taken by surprise and come suddenly, something like that. He was warned. He was handed a letter on his way. He just added it to his pile. He was warned by Haruspex and a few other things. Caesar was mocked as the Queen of Bithynia because of an alleged relationship with Nicomedes. The line was, "Caesar laid low the Gauls, Nicomedes laid low Caesar." None of Caesar's assassins survived more than 3 years after he was killed. They were all hunted down under the Pedian law to avenge Caesar. Caesar was followed by Augustus, probably the most well-known emperor and the namesake of the current monarch. Augustus fought under Caesar in Spain in his earlier career before he became emperor, but he was very cruel in his treatment of the prisoners, so much that they hailed Mark Antony as imperator. But Augustus managed to deal with Mark Antony and his opposition, and with Marcus Brutus, one of the murderers of Caesar. He chopped his head off and threw it at a statue, threw it at the foot of a statue of Caesar. So he got his revenge. The Varus disaster occurred during Augustus's reign. Now this is where Publius Quinctilius Varus and his legions were destroyed at Teutoburg Forest by the Germans, and Augustus was not happy. He would bang his head on the doorpost, saying, "Varus, give me back my legions." I find the story funny, but it's really, really sad. Rome was distraught at his death, and it was terrible defeat for the Romans. Augustus had a good character. He was honest, he was modest, he was frugal, and he kept to his morals so strongly that he even punished his family if they did something against him. His daughter was an adulterer, so he banished her to an island. Now, that's a very harsh treatment, but it shows that he is trying to set an example to his people. He even dressed in the clothes that they knitted for him. He was superstitious. He was terrified of lightning, and these superstitions, like I said earlier, they play a big role in the decisions they make. So he would not go out when there was lightning. Lightning would stop him from doing whatever it was he would have done without it. So these superstitions, these fears, they make an impact on what the emperors do. Augustus was followed by Tiberius. Tiberius was not a good emperor. He was an awful emperor. Tiberius was horrible. But before I get on to the horrors of Tiberius, let me tell you about the story of Claudius Pulcher, a Roman consul. He was about to fight a battle off the coast of Sicily when the sacred chickens wouldn't eat their food. So he gets frustrated and he says, if they will not eat, then let them drink. And he tosses them off the ship. And to add to this, he lost the battle. So perhaps the sacred chickens weren't needed after all. Poor things though, they didn't deserve that. Tiberius did a few good things as emperor. He stopped criminals from abusing sanctuaries as places of refuge, or well, sanctuary as you might say. Basically, if you were a criminal, you could go hide in a temple to escape the law, and because those were safe places for you. But he got rid of this, and well, criminals could no longer hide in temples. He gave the Praetorian Guard an organised barracks and fortified camp, so he kind of put them into order, protected against banditry and marauders by placing the military posts closer to each other. He also abolished foreign cults and astrology, which is a move against superstition, sort of external religions. But Tiberius quickly fell into depravity of the worst sort. I don't even want to talk about it, to be honest. You can read it in the summary, or you could read it in the book itself. But basically, Tiberius was every kind of bad that I couldn't even speak of because YouTube would demonetize me. He was awful. It's just unimaginable how bad he was. It made me cringe to read it. He was a very bad emperor. He just the worst things you could imagine. Enough of that though. One story I would like to say that demonstrates his cruelty is a fisherman came up to him showing him this massive fish he caught. Tiberius, absolutely shocked that this man has managed to get to where he was. I think because the island he was on wasn't supposed to be accessible. So what he does is he orders his guards to rub the poor man's face with the fish, skinning his face raw. It's just absolutely horrible. And then the poor fellow goes, "Oh, I'm so glad I didn't bring Caesar that massive crab I caught." So Tiberius orders his men to get the crab and do the exact same thing with the crab. It's horrible. Poor fisherman. I just hate Tiberius for that. Really, I do. Yeah, but the people absolutely hated him for this disgusting behaviour. There was a king, Artabanus of Parthia, who sent him a message basically just telling him to kill himself because he's a horrible guy. Suetonius does say he was very, very handsome, perfectly proportioned, is described. That makes me think of a Doryphoros, perfect looking person. Perhaps an example of a person that looks perfect in a mind is completely twisted. This seems to me like what Tiberius is well described as. Tiberius was followed by Caligula. Now Caligula, also terrible emperor. To start off with, Caligula grew up in the army. After that, Tiberius took him to his what should we call it, playhouse in Capreae, where all the twisted things took place, and this had an awful influence on Caligula, as you can imagine. I mean, Caligula even wanted to try to kill Tiberius at one point, but he didn't, and Tiberius knew about it, but Tiberius just let it go, or so it goes. But Caligula, oh my days, he was super cruel. It's just disgusting. He was callous and he was cruel, and I hate him for it. It's unbelievable. He was literally a crazed serial killer, and he would just snap his fingers and people would die. For no reason at all, he would just kill people. It's unbelievable. This guy is insane. I mean, on top of his awful relationships that he has with his sisters, the murdering and the killing is just too much for me. I really hate him. I think this makes him one of the worst emperors ever, at least in this book. I mean, I don't even want to talk about what he said to his wife. It's just abominable. And not only this, he deprived noblemen of Rome of their, prized possessions. Torquatus took his golden torque. They took King Cinnatus's lock of hair. He just took things from people, and he completely squandered Tiberius's fortune with stupid super projects. He was just literally trying to do the impossible with that money. There was a lot of money as well. 2,700 million sesterces. It's a crazy amount of money. He's an idiot. He just squandered. He wasted it so quickly. Less than a year. In less than a year, he squandered all that money just on stupid things. So yeah, he was a wasteful and rash idiot. And mental as well. Crazy guy. Now, another story that really makes me sad is what I like to call the Chad Colosseros. Now, Colosseros was a man called Aetius Proculus, and he was like a big cool guy that people looked up to, really muscly, and everyone was like, he was basically the ancient Chad. It's Chad versus insane emperor at this point. In this story. I mean, this guy is so cool. Like Caligula puts him in the arena and he just beats every fight that he gets put up against. So Caligula just puts him in rags and basically just gets him killed and strangled. Like, the guy is just too good. He literally just takes him out of his seat in the theatre, throws him against Thracian net fighters and whatever, and the guy manages to do it. He's just that good. But he dies because Caligula just will not stop at anything to kill innocent people and then people who's just jealous of or whatever. I really like this guy, Colossus. It's so sad, this story that he dies in. Rest in peace, Colossus. I mean, Caligula was just, he was horrible. The Praetorian Guard ended up killing him, you know, the people who were supposed to protect the emperor, but they needed to get rid of this guy. He was crazy. He was crazy. People were like, didn't even believe that he died. That's how terrifying this guy was. They refused to believe it because they thought it was a trick to, you know, try and kill more people, to see what they thought about him. Now, the next emperor is Claudius, and Claudius was the only family member who Caligula didn't kill. He just left him as a butt end for practical jokes. Claudius was stupid, and he gets made fun of throughout the book for this. I mean, okay, let's take this. In court, for instance, he would deal with things in the most inconsistent ways. One time, there was a woman who was refusing ownership of her son, so Claudius decided to make them marry, and only then would she accept him. Claudius did go to Britain in 43 AD, and he didn't really have to fight because the tribes there just surrendered to him. But Claudius wrote a lot of things. He was good in Greek, and he wrote works in Greek about the Etruscans. He wrote 20 volumes of Etruscan history and 8 of Carthaginian. So he was a writer, but he was scatterbrained and blind, as Suetonius says. How he died is uncertain. Maybe he was poisoned, but we don't really know. Claudius is followed by Nero, and if you know anything about Nero, you won't like him. But, or you maybe will. He has a weird kind of appeal to him. Nero the hero. Suetonius decides to show us the good things about Nero before showing us absolute undiluted horror of how he acted later. And so, what did Nero do good? I mean, he punished the early Christians who were causing trouble for the Romans early on. He entertained his people and he was virtuous, Suetonius says. He also promised to rule based on Augustus, but we'll see, of course, this did not happen. Nero had a passion for theatre, and so much so that he neglected his duties as emperor and decided to go to Achaea in Greece. He just stayed there, neglected his rule, was going around singing and performing for people. Nero eventually grew mad with power and gave in to every sort of horrible vice. Even the Vestal Virgins, which I was hoping no emperor would do as I read through this book. The Vestal Virgins, even they weren't a limit for him. Nero was best described as a nightmare, an absolute lunatic. He wasted so much money in excess. It was excessive. He was unfaithful, and it made him hated by his people. And he even killed his own family. Nero was just horrible. Nero was not a good emperor at all. Yeah, he set fire to Rome. I mean, can you believe it? This guy, literally, he was so short on money that he decided to set fire to Rome so he could get loot from it afterwards. The guy, someone said something like, when I am dead, may fire consume the earth. And then Nero decided, let's be whimsical and say, oh, while you're still alive. And so he decides to set fire to Rome. I mean, it's just insane. It's just, I think Nero is the basis for the standard, like, insane theatrical character, you know, a crazy clown. This is what I see when I read about Nero. We see an example here of an emperor reflecting in popular culture the insane theatrical type. So Suetonius talks about what Nero looked like. He describes him as ugly, an ugly guy, and he didn't care about his appearance. Nero eventually died. He was declared a public enemy by the Senate. He committed suicide before they could get to him. However, the Parthians, who is extremely generous to, loved Nero, and there were still some people who were appreciative of him after he died. With the death of Nero ends the Flavian Dynasty, and so we get a chaotic race for the throne and people trying to grab power. The year of the 4 emperors, AD 69, which starts with Galba. Now, Galba was prophesied to become emperor, but a lot of emperors are. So Galba basically launched a rebellion against Nero and took power after he died. because the soldiers liked him and they elevated him. But Galba was not a good emperor. He was greedy, cruel, and inconsistent. He disbanded the cohort of Germans who protected the emperor because he was short-sighted and stupid, basically. He was manipulated by 3 court officials named the Imperial Nursemaids, and because he let himself be guided by these idiots, his behavior was inconsistent and people didn't like this. Galba eventually fell down. He was killed by soldiers in the street. Otho, who's next in line, had killed him with his soldiers. Otho took power. Otho was a good friend of Nero, but Nero took his wife, so Otho was quite angry with him. Otho joined Galba's revolt in revenge, but Galba, as we know, just died, and now Otho takes power. The soldiers elevate him, but now comes another emperor very quickly, called Vitellius. Otho is arrived to by a soldier who tells him his army is defeated, and so Otho goes, alright, it's time's up, I guess. Even though his garrison called this man a deserter and a coward, the fact that the soldier then kills himself in front of Otho leaves such a big impact on him that Otho just loses all hope and decides to do that himself. The Roman people consider this some sort of a virtuous death, better than being a horrible emperor, I guess. Vitellius comes in power, and Vitellius is an absolute glutton, and he just eats. He just has banquets all the time. He's extremely extravagant. He even makes this dish full of extremely exotic foods called the Shield of Minerva, and bringing food of greatest expense from the furthest parts of the empire to satisfy his cravings. He eats so much, banquets 4 or 3 times a day, and just goes out for random banquets throughout the day, and then makes himself sick so he can keep eating. He was brutal. He killed his family, his friends, you know, Caligula kind of stuff. Vespasian's guard comes and finds him hiding. They don't recognize him at first, but when they do, they kill him. They're quite a painful, nasty death. Killing method was invented by Caligula as well. The torture of the little cuts. Not nice at all. Yeah, nasty stuff really. But Vitellius dies in this way, and he's followed by Vespasian. And now, the year of the 4 emperors, we have our 4th emperor, so naturally it ends. As it does end, we have our next dynasty, the Flavian Dynasty, beginning with Vespasian. Vespasian has 2 sons. He has Titus and Domitian. Titus is the better son, and Domitian, well, we'll see about them later. So Vespasian was actually a pretty good emperor, and naturally, when you have a good emperor, you have stability. Like with Augustus, who ruled for a very long time. In fact, he was like the longest reigning Roman emperor, and also the first. So he tried to restore Rome after Nero's stupid burning. I don't know why Nero did that. Nero's an idiot. But anyway, we're past Nero and his insanity. Now, the future emperors after the crazy succession that Nero, we have the Roman emperors trying to fix up Rome again. I mean, the stuff that was burned was absolutely invaluable, and yeah, we've lost so much of Rome's history because of what Nero did. It's so saddening. So Vespasian, patient, fair emperor, but he needed money, so he was greedy, and he was a swindler. He didn't have honest ways of making money, but this guy had a tough time. One of his methods was he would have some not so honest officials soak up money like sponges through all their mischievous means, and then he'd just squeeze them out and take all their money. He'd extort them. So yeah, they were called his sponges. This is his way of making money. Vespasian was a guy who had a kind of a vulgar, puerile humor, but Suetonius says this guy had perfect health. He even describes his daily routine. He woke up early, deals with correspondence and reports. And then he'd invite his friends to wish him good morning while he dressed for the day. He'd attend to any urgent business, take a drive, return for a nap. Then he took a bath, had dinner, and while he was in a happy mood, people would ask him for favors. But then he died. He's followed by Titus. Titus is a good emperor. He was very clever and had such remarkable skills. Titus. He had a phenomenal memory. He was good in fighting, in horse riding, in playing the lyre. This guy was just talented. He was naturally, I imagine, a good emperor. Reading about him was a relief after Nero and all the crazy guys that came before him, Tiberius. We're finally back to a good emperor, and I'm thinking more about Augustus again. Titus was selfless and generous. Two quotes that I like that Suetonius described him. No monster of vice, but an exceptionally noble character. No emperor could have been less of a robber than Titus. Now these things say a lot about Titus. He's a great emperor. He was caring, kind, loving, and he was to his brother Domitian, who didn't reciprocate, which is quite a sad story. He even had a relationship with this Queen Berenice, a Jewish queen, but his people didn't like her because she was Jewish, so he had to send her away and stop the relationship, which shows that he's more willing to take into account what his people want rather than what he wants. And I think as an emperor, as a leader, that is a very, very admirable quality. I admire him for that. Pompey erupts in 79 AD during Titus's reign, big event. Domitian decides that before he's dead, just to tell his servants to leave him alone and just consider him dead. Domitian really wants power, and so he just leaves him there and takes over. It doesn't give any real consideration to his dead brother. He just lets him be admired as Divus, and that's it. Lets him be worshipped. Domitian leads a bunch of unnecessary campaigns to boost his reputation, and then Domitian treats his brother with just shamelessness and disrespect, and it's just horrible to him. He doesn't really acknowledge his death. He just wants power. He doesn't really care when his brother is dying. He just goes, you know what, assume him dead, whatever. He's just not nice. Suetonius says, he never once stopped plotting secretly or openly against his brother. Horrible treatment of his brother is, to me, appalling and saddening. What led to Domitian's downfall was his arrogance, and he just wanted power, this guy. He had people refer to him as Lord God, so people didn't like him. People were fed up with this guy, thinking he's amazing and whatever, and so they just killed him. They assassinated him. One of the main reasons for Domitian's killing is the fact that he was cruel and killed senators. Some of them for just basically no reason. When you kill senators, you're gonna have problems. One of the things that he said himself was a quote that I mentioned at the start. The third one. Domitian was respected by the troops, so when he died, they wanted revenge on his assassins. The senators were delighted when Domitian died, and they ordered all his records and memories of his reign to be obliterated because they hated him. He just killed senators for no reason sometimes. And there we go. We've reached the end. There's loads more in this book. I've just done an extensive job of looking at what each emperor did. The little stories in there, like Colosseros, the chicken, the fisherman, stuff like that. It's all full of interesting little stories about the emperors. Yeah, we truly see individuals come out. These individuals are ones in extreme power. Once you have read this, maybe once you just looked at this video and read my summary, and that'll be enough for you, you can see maybe are some of our leaders today reflecting these people, these emperors, and what can we learn about human nature and just ourselves as normal people, because that's what the Roman emperors are. They're normal people. What can we learn about ourselves? What can we learn about human nature from looking at these people? I'd say an awful lot, and I'd say that power, for one, corrupts. And yeah, I would say also we do have a duality. Some emperors are good, some are bad, and it depends which way they go. Well, I would like to say thank you for listening, and I hope that you found this summary to be useful, that you do yourself enjoy the book, find some valuable insight. This is Suetonius' biggest work, and I hope I've done it justice through the summaries that I've made. So yeah, thank you. Consider subscribing and subscribing to my newsletter also. And yeah, be sure to see more from me. Thank you.